Warning: this episode contains descriptions of child abduction, sexual assault, and fatal violence. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. Hey folks, in a moment I'm going to tell you very briefly about a cold case out of North Dakota. And when I say briefly, I mean very, very briefly, because this case is so cold that I've struck out on finding folks to interview. It all went down almost 63 years ago. In fact, it's the oldest cold case listed officially in North Dakota. There might still be some people around out there who could tell us more. They would be about 82 years old today. Maybe some of you can help me locate them. But before we jump into that cold case, a few tidbits to share here. First of all, if you have just recently found your way to this show, hopefully you have already come to understand that there are currently 11 seasons of the show ready to be binged, as well as a few one-episode stories. You can find information about me and the show at my website, dakotaspotlight.com. Again, head over to dakotaspotlight.com for more information about the show and all 11 seasons. There's also some information there about the Emmy Award-winning documentary film I co-produced, a free newsletter you can sign up for, and more. And again, for you new listeners, I also want to let you know that this show is an independent podcast, and I do almost the entirety of the work myself. To keep the lights on, I depend on the wonderful support of listeners. So, real short and sweet, the subscription program here is called Spotlight Plus. When you subscribe to Plus, you get all Dakota Spotlight episodes ad-free. Plans start at just $5 a month, and there's no long-term commitment. Another nice thing about Plus is that you get any series or season all at once. So, for example, if I put out a 7-part season, rolling out one episode a week for 7 weeks, as a Plus subscriber, you get access to all of them from day one. There's no waiting, and there's no ads. So, if you like what you're hearing here and want to help this show continue on, please consider subscribing to Spotlight Plus. I've also started a couple of other types of shows and episodes. Right here at Dakota Spotlight, I've started some original crime stories, that is, fiction written and narrated by me. In fact, episode 2 of my 5-part story, Dead Cold Drop, comes out tomorrow, right here at Dakota Spotlight. I hope these creative stories help keep you entertained while we are between seasons. And finally, if you're one of those folks who have trouble sleeping, check out my sleep podcast called The Sleep Retreat. That's a separate show, a separate podcast. Search The Sleep Retreat on your podcast app or head over to thesleepretreatpodcast.com. I promise you, you will be snoozing in no time. Okay, let's jump into this very short segment about North Dakota's coldest and oldest case. The Attorney General's website lists cold cases in North Dakota, and it lists them chronologically. The first one on the list is the case of Larry Phebus. This is what the AG's website says. Larry Phebus, homicide. On March 27, 1963, the body of Larry Phebus, age 14, was found 2.5 miles south of Alexander, North Dakota. Phebus disappeared and was presumed to have been murdered on or about October 20th, 1962. Autopsy reports indicated that Phebus died as a result of asphyxiation. Now, as I said, what follows is very short. It's just some things I've gathered from newspaper articles. Without access to the police file or interviewees, it's hard to take this story to the next level. And by the way, if you've listened to my 3rd season titled A Better Search for Barbara, you will likely recognize some of these place names. For one, the town of Tioga, North Dakota is where Barbara was born, and Williston is the town she lived in when she vanished without a trace. Larry Jo Phebus arrived at the tiny town of Tioga, North Dakota on August 10, 1962. He was just 14 years old. Despite what most of the press would report later, he didn't travel from Indiana to join up with his older brother Chester. Of course, this wasn't the only thing the press got wrong back then. In reality, Larry arrived in North Dakota with his brother, Chester, and his brother's friend, Sam Wallace, both 19 years old. The trio had traveled from Odessa, Texas, and once in Tioga, they lived together in a room at the Travelers Motel. Chester and Sam were in North Dakota to find work in the oil fields. Larry Jo got enrolled in school in Tioga. He was behind in his studies, and so, despite being 14, he was placed in the 6th grade. Teachers would later describe Larry Phebus as outgoing with a cute smile and freckles. He talked about his family a lot, they said. He liked to show teachers a picture of his sister. He said he didn't much like the cold climate in North Dakota. His father was in the state pen in Indiana for robbery. Another thing the press got wrong, or at least exaggerated on, was little Larry's tendency to hitchhike. Yes, it was true that Larry did hitchhike now and then, but it was a specific route to the town of Ray, North Dakota, just 15 miles away. He had friends there, but no, he didn't crisscross North Dakota by thumbing his way along the highways. Another thing he didn't do was just take off from the motel. On the evening of Saturday, October 20, 1962, the older boys, Chester Phebus and Sam Wallace, had plans. Big plans. They were going to a movie on a double date in the big town of Williston, an hour's drive away. Larry wasn't invited, of course. He stayed home at the motel with his school books and likely flipped on the 1962 Saturday night TV lineup. Maybe Gunsmoke on KNOX Channel 10.
Gunsmoke, starring James Arness as Matt Dillon.
Meanwhile, the 19-year-olds, Chester Phebus and Sam Wallace, were with their dates in Williston. Perhaps they grabbed a burger before heading to the movie theater to see The Chapman Report with Jane Fonda and Shelley Winters, or perhaps Rear Window with Jimmy Stewart, both playing that month around the state.
Well, yes, how did you do that stuff?
Oh, simple. I was nursing a director at General Motors. Kidney ailment, they said. Nerves, I said.
Whatever the movie, the double date went on until late that night when the boys finally made their way home to the tiny town of Tioga and their little room at the Travelers Motel. When they arrived, though, Larry wasn't there. Chester knew immediately something wasn't right. He later stated, "He never went anywhere, to the store, to play football, or anywhere without leaving us a note telling us where he was going." The next morning, when Larry still hadn't come home, Chester went out looking for his little brother. He talked to Larry's two closest friends in Tioga. He walked around the block, he drove around town and then to the town of Ray and back again. He checked any spots Larry might be at. But alas, still nothing. As Sunday came to a close, Chester considered what to do next. On Monday, Chester filed an official missing persons report and phoned relatives in Indiana. Maybe Larry had tired of the cold and headed homeward. But with what money? Chester held out hope that Larry would somehow show up that night or the next day, or maybe the next day after that. Sure, it was wishful thinking, but what's wrong with wishful thinking? But Larry didn't return. He was gone. He didn't come back the next day, or the next week, or the next month, or the month after that. He was just gone. And as it always must, life went on for the little town of Tioga, and for Chester, and for Wallace. Chester moved to Williston. Wollaston got engaged to a young woman in Ray, North Dakota. A few months later, Chester picked up some minor traffic charges. Instead of spending 30 days in jail, he left North Dakota. He went to California and moved in with his mother. And of course, Larry hadn't shown up there either, or anywhere else. "5 months after Larry went missing, on Thursday, March 28, 1963, near the town of Alexander, North Dakota, Farmer Clark Jenner and his hired hand, John Mann, were clearing rocks when they stumbled upon the partially unclothed body of a teenage boy. He had been bound with a clothesline, and his pants were down at his ankles. Scattered nearby lay beer bottles, a brown glove, and garments matching the outfit Larry Jo had worn the night he disappeared. Inside a pocket, investigators found $1.40 in coins. What they didn't find was an ID. When the cops remembered the missing 14-year-old kid from Tioga, they went looking for folks who knew them. The motel told the detectives those boys have moved out a while ago. Chester was in California, but Sam Wallace was now living in Ray. The cops tracked him down somehow, picked him up, and took him to the site where the body was found. He immediately identified the jacket as belonging to Larry Jo. An autopsy confirmed death by strangulation and evidence of sexual assault. Chester returned to North Dakota on April 2, 1963, to help identify his brother's remains and help the cops with their investigation. When he took a look at his deceased kid brother, he was unable to identify the body himself, but X-rays later revealed an old collarbone fracture that matched Larry Jo's medical records. Both Chester and Sam Wallace passed polygraph tests. In fact, they volunteered to take them without being asked. By October of 1963, 1 year after Larry went missing, the investigation had stalled. Williams County, where Tioga is located, transferred the case to McKenzie County, where the body was found. No further public updates followed, and the case gradually slipped into cold case status. Sheriff Leroy Lutz of Williams County did share some information with a local reporter. One thing he shared was that in May of 1963, working with Alaska authorities, North Dakota investigators questioned a former Tioga oilfield laborer who had left town shortly after Larry Jo disappeared. He refused a polygraph and denied ever living in Tioga. By October, he was almost completely ruled out for reasons the cops would not share with the press. Oddly, Lutz also stated that one other person of interest has existed. He did not name the individual, but did say whoever it was had apparently never been interviewed. Lutz summed up the investigation by saying, "The killer could very well be in this area, right within a couple blocks of me." And that is about all I know about the case of Larry Jo Phebus. If you have any information, contact the McKenzie County Sheriff's Department at 701-444-3654. And if you yourself happen to know or knew Sam Wallace, Chester's friend who passed a polygraph test, who once lived in Ray, North Dakota, please let me know. He would be about 82 years of age right now, I think. I can be reached by email at dakotaspotlight@gmail.com. Again, that's about all I have on the story of Larry Phebus. Head over to dakotaspotlight.com for more info. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.